Today, she's going to be talking about her experiences battling these strongers and to be stronger than them and not to let these kind of struggles defeat her in the end. And so please welcome to the stage the 2015 Miss Asian Global, Pamela Lagera.
Thank you, Jen. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not fit enough. I'm not smart enough. And I'm not successful enough. These are some of the thoughts that run through my mind almost every single day. And because of these thoughts, I stop myself from focusing on the things that I need to do. I stop myself from taking on new opportunities and seizing the day, all because I have this longing fear of not being good enough. I have atelophobia. And for those of you who have never heard of the term before, it stands for having a fear of imperfection. I have a fear of failure. And it is my fears of failure and imperfection that has motivated me to dig deeper and study the reasons behind it. I first want to share with you all a few stories of individuals who didn't let the power of fear stop them from growing. These noteworthy individuals didn't let that fear stunt them from growing and ultimately empowered themselves and others around them. This is M. Ford, one of the first beauty bloggers that I had ever started following on YouTube. M is one of the brave few who creates original and informative content on the internet by creating online tutorials of how to achieve certain makeup looks for anyone in the whole world to achieve. So you may be thinking, so what? What sets M. Ford apart from the hundreds of other beauty bloggers out there, many who actually get millions of views on most of their videos? Well, I personally consider her to be one of the most inspirational beauty bloggers out there. And this is why. Since June 24th, 2014, M has been exposing her natural, makeup-free self to the world through her YouTube tutorials, knowing that there would be massive backlash. And there was. These are only some of the negative comments that M would receive for her videos. As you can see, she would receive things such as, "You look disgusting," or "This is false advertising." Or she would even receive comments such as, "Imagine waking up next to her in the morning." Yet despite knowing that she was going to get this criticism and backlash, M still showed her imperfections, even when she knew that this could potentially alienate her from her fan base. So why did she keep posting? Why would M consciously present her imperfections to the world? Now let's look at another example of someone who was only in his teens when he decided to share his imperfections with others. Everyone, meet Vic Santos. And as a teenager, Vic was able to lose over 40 pounds of fat, put on muscle, and share his extremely inspirational journey with the online world. A weight loss journey this big meant that Vic was going to have to make some sacrifices, find discipline, and most importantly, hold himself accountable. But why would a teenager who knew that he was imperfect and had failed in his mind actually expose his imperfections to others? Why would anyone do that when it is more in our human nature to hide from others anything that may deem us as flawed and imperfect? Finally, I want to introduce you all to Diana. Diana is neither a vlogger nor a social media enthusiast. Diana is actually more like many of us here today, who only occasionally post pictures and videos online. And I want to talk about Diana because I'm sure that many of us can relate to her story in some way. So Diana had a hard upbringing. Her parents immigrated to America when she was just born. Her parents didn't have a lot of money. They fought almost every day. And it didn't help that her father was a drinker and verbally abusive to his wife and children. And this affected Diana because she was raised in a very strict and harsh environment. And because she was raised in a conservative home where talking back to her parents resulted in punishment, she became fearful of disappointing them and failing them. And by the time Diana had applied to college, she got accepted into her dream school, the University of California, San Diego. Now, everything was all set for her to attend, except for one thing. Her parents didn't want her to go. San Diego was hundreds of miles away from her home, and her parents wanted her a lot closer. And at around the same time that she was accepted into UCSD, Diana also got an acceptance letter into UC Berkeley, a school that was about only 20 miles away from her home in San Francisco. So her parents gave her an ultimatum. She was to attend UC Berkeley, live at home, and just commute to and from school every day. Now, Diana loved her parents, of course, but she wanted space for herself. She wanted to experience life away from where she was born and raised. And even if she feared that her parents would be disappointed in her going against their word, she decided to take a risk and say that she wanted to follow her own path. Diana told her parents, "Okay, I'll go to UC Berkeley, but I will not be living at home." Now, for some of us, that may be an easy conversation to make with our parents. But if Diana was raised to believe that she could never make decisions without risking embarrassment, punishment, and heartache, then how was she able to find the strength to say no? Now, with these three examples in mind, let's switch gears a little bit and take a journey back in time. Way back to a time when our species looked less like this and a little more like this. 200,000 years ago, you only needed 4 key things to survive and live a successful life. You needed your nutrients, you needed clothing and shelter, and last but certainly not least, you needed whatever it took for you to not get eaten alive. Now, as long as you had these 4 things, you had a perfect life. 200,000 years ago, the perfect life was a very objective concept. But nowadays, it's different. Today, the idea of a perfect life is subjective. In this day and age, perfection is abstract. But the resources made accessible to us still define perfection as an objective concept. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, to be perfect means to be entirely without fault. It means to satisfy all requirements and agree to an ideal standard. But how can we agree to an ideal standard and define perfect from a set list when we all live completely different lives with different resources, opportunities, and standards? We must redefine our ideas of perfection into something that reflects our own personal experiences, our own potential, and most importantly, our own failures. Because if we abide by an objective idea of perfection in our minds, the moment we fail, we are no longer without fault. We no longer satisfy the set requirements, and we therefore do not agree to the ideal standard. We therefore become vulnerable and sensitive to criticism, rejection, and change. And for people like me, that's something to fear of in this world. But why do we have this fear if it's something that stops us from finding our purpose and living out our passions? Let's picture ourselves back again, back to 200,000 years ago, hunting and gathering in the plains of Africa. Now, during this time, we lived in a very unpredictable environment. From climate changes to hungry predators, we needed to be equipped with the right skills and mindset if we wanted to survive. So who became the survivors? And who, in turn, became dinner? Well, the ones who were less likely to survive were the ones who had that natural urge to be bold and loud. And the ones who actually had a better chance at survival used avoidance and camouflage to escape from danger. If your first instinct was to run away and hide whenever a larger predator looked at you straight in the eye, your chances of survival were actually much better than those who didn't have that instinct and would rather stand their ground. The survivors also had to maintain their social relationships. They did whatever it took for them to please their group and not get rejected. Because the moment that they were banished from the group, their chances of death became much, much greater. So as evolution of the human race took its course, the genes that encoded for the characteristics that allowed humans to act on fear rather than strength made its way right into the modern human. I believe our innate feelings of fear of failure and imperfection come from our ancestors dating all the way back to 200,000 years ago. And I believe that this is a big factor into what makes up our primitive mindsets. Our primitive mindset has the power to control our more evolved and modern mindset, making us act on our fears rather than finding the strength to confront them. So these fears that come from our ancestors' genetic information ultimately make us nervous and hesitant whenever unfamiliar opportunities, risky situations, and new challenges come into our daily lives. But it doesn't have to be that way. M. Ford overcame her fears of imperfection and failure and showed the world that you don't have to be perfect to be beautiful. She proved that even someone like her, who is considered a beauty expert to many, could still have a lot of flaws. And by sharing her imperfections, she empowered herself and inspired millions of people. And with Vic Santos, instead of accepting his fears of imperfection about how he physically felt about himself, he decided to take on that fear, overcome the challenge, and share his journey, even though he understood how he was imperfect. And by sharing this, he was able to inspire himself and inspire others around them to start their own ideas of physical affection. And as for Diana, who's not a blogger nor a social media icon, she is instead your average 20-something young lady. Because she overcame her fears of breaking into a new environment, going against her parents' wishes, and ultimately a fear of possible failure, she was able to learn lessons in the value of courage and independence. And not long after UC Berkeley, Diana got into medical school. She is currently in her 4th year and is soon applying to residency. I know that she will continue to achieve greatness, no matter what new challenges that she may face. So even if you think you aren't good enough, even if you're the type to constantly focus on your failures, if you do know that deep down inside that you are good enough and that you have the ability to accomplish your goals and dreams, then you will be able to achieve what you initially thought you couldn't. In life, you have 2 choices. You have the choice where you can listen to your imperfections and perceive failures. Or you can choose the path where you do know that you are good enough and that you are not a failure. And if you choose that path, you just might both inspire and empower others to reach their very own personal and professional dreams. Take it from me, someone who was initially afraid of not being good enough, all because of her imperfections and perceived failures. But when I chose the other path and told myself that I am good enough, and that I am not a failure, and that my potential is limitless and cannot be reduced by the opinions of others, well, that path was much better, much more fun, and it made all the difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pam. That was, for your first time being on the Imagine Talk stage, I thought that was incredible. Did you guys think so?
I was definitely nervous, so.
Yeah, she was backstage. She was so nervous. She was telling me, how do I go on there and memorize all this stuff? But I think you did an amazing job. So to the audience, we're going to have a break in a little bit, but before, I wanted to see if anyone had any questions for Pamela. Okay, I know I do. So for me, competing in pageants as well, I came to realize that it's not about competing with other girls, it's competing against yourself. And as long as going through pageants and coming out of it being better than the person you were yesterday, that's the ultimate goal. And so I'm glad that we're able to share that with each other. So my question for you is that to young adults who are juggling so many different things in their lives and always having to face that kind of insecurity of not being good enough, what advice do you have for them to overcome that?
So just like what I was trying to emphasize in my talk, we all have this inside of us. We have this fear. No matter how successful you are now, you're always going to have something that makes you feel a little hesitant, before you try out some new opportunity that's given to you. And I think my advice would be just to take that risk and go for it, because the more you expose yourself to your fears, your biggest fears, such as talking on stage in front of 100 people, the more you do that, the more you'll become comfortable. Your threshold for being afraid and being anxious will start to go up, will start to be higher, and you won't have to be as scared anymore the more and more you do it. So try it out. Go for it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Pam. So now we're going to have about a 20-minute break. Before we start the break, we have a lot of raffle prizes that will be available to our audience members today. The first is we have 3 gift certificates courtesy of our sponsor, Dr. Amanda Chang of Days to Smile. She's a orthodontic service office here in San Francisco. She has 3 gift certificates worth $300 each. Forever Bumore, my family business, we also have 5 goodie bags available worth more than $50. Maybe later in the day, I'll show you guys what's in there. We have 5 of that, and then we also have a really delicious Nestle gift basket, if I don't take it for myself later on. But we do have all those prizes and more, and so we'll bring it up to the stage for you guys later on. So right now, we'll have a 20-minute break, and I'll see you guys back soon. Thank you so much.